Today we have the latest NHL trade and free agent rumors talking about teams like the Maple Leafs, the Habs, the Canucks, Vegas. We also have the latest on players like Vladimir Tarasenko, as well as Gabriel Landeskog, and several signings with expansion draft implications. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now again, this is another video with a lot of information in it, so certainly pay close attention and watch all the way through so you don't miss anything. So let's get started with a number of signings here. Pretty well all of these signings, you can say to a degree, are expansion draft related to help teams meet their exposure requirements. And some of these players, they may not necessarily be picked, but they'll certainly be involved in the process here for Seattle. So first up, we got the New York Rangers signing forward Julien Gauthier to a one-year deal. It's $775,000 at the NHL level, $300,000 at the AHL level. So it is a one-year, two-way deal. I do wonder what they'll do with Gauthier when it comes to expansion. There's a really good chance he will be exposed, and he just might be a player that Ron Francis might be interested in. He was, of course, drafted originally by the Hurricanes, so Ron Francis knows a bit about this player. So we'll see. He very well could be the potential pick from the Rangers, but there is other things going on that there'll be options there too. So we will see what happens. Now, speaking of the Hurricanes, they also made a signing today to meet their exposure requirements, and that's signing forward Morgan Geekie to another one-year, two-way contract as well. Similar type of contract where it's a $750,000 NHL salary, except $75,000 at the AHL level. The Columbus Blue Jackets signed goaltender Cam Johnson to a one-year, two-way contract as well. Same sort of terms as Geekie. It's a two-way deal, $750,000 NHL, $75,000 AHL. That's to help meet their goaltending requirements. Obviously, with the incident that recently happened, they're short a goaltender now in their organization, or they might not have signed Johnson otherwise. So they needed a goaltender under contract to meet their exposure requirements. Elvis is exempt here in this case, and they obviously would like to protect Korpisalo. So that leads another goaltender to be under contract here and be exposed. We also saw the San Jose Sharks sign forward Dylan Gambrell to a contract extension. He gets a one-year deal at $1.1 million. Now, I do wonder if Gambrell's likely going to be available in expansion. I would suspect the Sharks probably won't protect him. I kind of wonder if they might have overpaid just a little bit to risk not losing him. I'm not really sure. That contract seems like a little bit much to me, but I thought he might get more like $900,000 or $1 million. But either way, not drastically different. And still another example here of teams signing players to make them available here in expansion. Now, speaking of expansion, we also got word on another player waiving his no-move clause, which came after I had recorded yesterday's video, so that we can add longtime goalie Ben Bishop of the Dallas Stars to that list, who has a no-move. I mean, Bishop has missed the better part of the last couple of years, has had a lot of injuries. I would suspect that the odds of him being selected are probably slim. You never know. I mean, if they have some kind of reassurance that he's healthy, then maybe, but obviously Dallas talked to Bishop about this so they can protect Hudobin. Of course, Ottinger is exempt, and then they can decide what to do from there. I would suspect that the Dallas Stars would really like to move on from that Bishop contract, who still has a couple of years left on it at like $4.9 million. But, at the same time, I'm not sure at all that Seattle would touch that, but we'll have to wait and see. If that doesn't happen, that he goes to Seattle, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to find another way to move on from him if possible. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of free agent and trade rumors heading into the expansion draft. Now, as of tomorrow afternoon at, I believe it's 3 o'clock Eastern time, there will be a roster freeze. So players will no longer be eligible to be moved. So the rosters will be frozen. Expansion draft protection lists are then going to be finalized shortly after, and we should be able to find out who is protected and who's not sometime on Sunday. I'm not really sure exactly what time the NHL will be making that available Sunday, but it should be available on that day, so we can get a better idea here of what teams are deciding to do in that regard. So we might see a decent amount of activity between either tonight or into tomorrow leading into this roster freeze, so we'll stay tuned. We'll see at least a little bit of last minute activity, I would suspect. Now, when it comes to one of the top free agents on the market, or pending free agents I should say, Gabriel Landeskog has been getting a ton of attention here as of late. We saw reports from Dave Pagnotta that we talked about yesterday saying that if he makes it to market, that the Leafs would be very interested. In as much as that sounds all fine and dandy, but the connection of Landeskog to the fact that he spends part of his offseason in Toronto, that's all good and dandy, and he could replace Hyman. I get all that, but I think it'll be very, very challenging for the Leafs to be real solid players and contenders to sign Landeskog. If they can't afford Hyman and they're going to lose Hyman, how are they going to afford Landeskog? It's going to be tricky. They might move Kerfoot, or he could go in expansion. They could consider trading Morgan Rielly, but again, it'd be another high-end forward that I'm not really sure that it helps him a whole lot, even though he's a really good player. So I'm not really sure that the connection to Toronto is much of anything to really put much stock into it, but I guess we'll see what the insiders are saying. But certainly I've seen a guy like Andy Strickland, who seems to be a little bit more connected to the situation, and Elliot Friedman as well, talk about teams that would be very interested and that Landeskog would be interested in as well, should he make it to free agency. And the top one on that list is the St. Louis Blues. So obviously, there is a connection there. He's really good friends with Ryan O'Reilly, who, of course, played with him in Colorado before. And we know that the Blues are certainly looking to move Tarasenko. And, they could possibly free up some money to make that happen. So that could be a fit. But other teams that have been mentioned when it comes to Landeskog include Florida, Tampa, Vegas. The Islanders are in the mix there. And the Maple Leafs were mentioned as well. But if you look at that list of teams, a lot of them would have a very, very difficult time cap-wise making it work. So to me, he either finds a way to stay in Colorado, goes to St. Louis. I would say, they'd probably have one of the easier times making it happen with the Lightning, the Golden Knights, even the Islanders. There's all potential fits there to a degree, but it's going to be really hard unless they're going to have to shed a ton of other salary, which could possibly happen. But without seeing those subsequent moves lining up here, it's hard to imagine how they can make it work, at least as of today. But we will see. But Gabriel Landeskog, apparently, according to some sources that we're seeing online, with Andy Strickland being the main one I've been following on this, because he seems to be, like I said, the most connected. There's word that when he's talking about what he could get on the open market, that it's going to be between 9 and 10 million is what he and his agent are going to be seeking, and that he's willing to take a hometown discount and stay with the Avalanche. So what's a hometown discount on that? Maybe closer to 8 million? That's still a ton of money for a guy that's making just over 5.5. If you look at the Ryan Nugent-Hopkins contract that he just signed with the Oilers, that 8-year deal, those two guys were drafted the exact same year, number 1, number 2, first and second overall. And they've got pretty much exactly very, very similar stats. They've played almost the same number of games. The point totals are extremely close. You could probably argue that Landeskog has slightly more upside, ever so slightly, that is. And you could also argue that maybe you're willing to pay a little bit more for Landeskog because of some of the intangibles that you get that you may not get with Nugent-Hopkins. Like, you're going to get a big, strong, physical winger as opposed to a different kind of player in Nugent-Hopkins who's more of a finesse player, whereas Landeskog can drop the gloves. He can give you all those leadership qualities. You do have to pay sometimes for that. It certainly drives up his value. So if you take that contract of Nugent-Hopkins that he just signed, and you can say, offensively speaking, they're extremely comparable, and then you maybe bring in another comparable contract like an Anders Lee with the Islanders that was signed just a couple years ago. Lee was about the same age that Landeskog is now. He's 28, going to be 29 when next season starts. And he signed a 7-year, $7 million deal per year. So, we got 7x7 on Lee, just over 5 on Nugent-Hopkins. To me, $7 million a year would be the most for Landeskog. I love Gabe Landeskog. I think he's a tremendous hockey player. I would take him on my team any day of the week, but for the right price, of course. For him to get $9 or $10 million just seems a little bit over ambitious, and I just don't see that happening. I don't really see that there's really any teams that he's been linked to that can afford it, for one. And I just don't know that he's worth it. He's going to be 29. He plays a physical style of game. They need to be careful so that it might be one of those contracts that in the first couple of years it's decent, and then after that it becomes an albatross, and you don't want that. I mean, we've seen a lot of contracts just get bought out because of those back-end deals and how that works out. So I don't quite understand the numbers that they're going for here. I would think if the Avalanche came up closer to 7 mil, that should get it done. If they offered him 7x7 or something close to that, you would think that would keep him in the Avalanche organization. But at this point, it's believed that they have come up closer to that on a shorter term deal. So I think they've discussed multiple terms. I think they've looked at 3, 5, and 7 or 8. From what we're seeing here from Strickland online through Twitter and the Athletic here. So I don't know. To me, it just seems like a major disconnect between Landeskog and the Avs. I think it's more and more likely that he very well could leave, but But if I had to peg a team that I felt was most likely him to go to, besides Colorado, I would say St. Louis is your most likely landing spot destination for him. But I'm not convinced he's going to get the money that they're rumored to be looking for. And we'll have to watch that and see if we get any more updated information, because that's an awful lot of money for what he brings to the table. Now, before we jump any further into today's video, I do need to pause for a moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So thanks very much for watching that promotional video. I do appreciate it. Getting back into today's content, I do want to touch on the Montreal Canadiens. Now, we did get word as well. Of course, we know what's going on with Shea Weber. We're waiting for further clarification, but there's a lot of things going on in Montreal that could have this team looking a fair bit different next year. I mean, they do have a lot of expired contracts, and one of their top players in the playoffs, who was a defensive specialist and played a big role in getting them to as far as they went into the finals, was Phillip Danault. Now, there is word as well from various NHL reporters indicating that the Habs are not going to be re-offering Danault a new contract, that they're going to be letting him test free agency, and I believe they're even okay with him exploring the market even now to see what's out there. A lot of teams are letting players do this just so they can get an idea of where things might go, if they're going to be able to keep the player or not, and maybe they come back to him on actual free agency day and say, okay, I've explored the market, I'll change my request here a little bit, and they hammer something out. That's possible. But at this point, we know he was offered a $5 million per year deal of 6 years back in the fall, and he rejected that. He didn't really have a great season, in my opinion. He had a great playoff defensively, but I don't see how, with what they have going on in Montreal, that you can really afford to put that much more money into a guy like Danault. Like, he's a great player. You want to keep him. But again, everybody's got a price, and you can only put yourself in a situation where you just can't afford to overpay too many guys. Like, this really handcuffs you with knowing the cap's not going up for a number of years. So at this point, it looks like Phillip Danault is very likely done in Montreal. We can't say that with certainty because it really depends on what other teams decide to talk to him and offer him. But I mean, if another team comes along and offers him more than $5 million a year on a 5-6 year deal, there's a really good chance he's probably going to take that. But if he tests the market and decides that, I don't see anything I like better than what we've talked about with Montreal, maybe he comes back, maybe it works out. But, there's certainly some uncertainty there, as best we can say. It looks like his time in Montreal is quite likely over with. And of course, there's also talk that the Habs would really like to keep Jake Allen. And the price tag, though, on an expansion draft deal with Seattle is going to be quite costly. For Seattle to not take Jake Allen, apparently, according to Elliot Friedman, is going to cost either a first-round pick and something else with it, or they're looking at like a higher end prospect and maybe a second or third round pick. So it's going to be quite costly. As much as Jake's important, you have to evaluate here, can we find another goaltender for a comparable price that will give us the same value? And if they're confident in that, they might have to just, cut bait and let him go if that's what Seattle wants to do. But Seattle is going to have a few of their players at their disposal that they might prefer to take instead. There's going to be a decent amount of other goaltenders available that I don't think it's a given here that Jake Allen is selected, but the odds are certainly good because he has played, pretty solid in a backup type of role over the past couple of years. So we'll see what happens, but I'm not convinced right now that Bergevin strikes the deal with Seattle because the prices are so high in order to protect one guy. There is word as well the Vegas Golden Knights are taking calls on both goaltenders, and there are some people out there and that believe that the Golden Knights have like a handshake deal on a trade for one of their goalies, and it's going to be announced and executed after the expansion draft, because the team that they're obviously dealing with is not in a situation where they can make it happen right now for exposure purposes. So I'm not really sure exactly what's could be there. I mean, we'll find out, because if something comes very quickly after the freeze is lifted, after expansion, then we'll know that maybe there was some truth to it, but it's hard to say right now. But I do believe that they're going to try hard to trade a goaltender. As I mentioned before, I think you can look at a team like New Jersey. They've been linked to them, as well as other teams looking to move a goaltender as well. So the Golden Knights are bound to do something here. They need the flexibility. Many people believe this will happen in some capacity, whether it's right after expansion or sometime here early into the offseason. So we'll have to stay tuned on that front here as well. Now, another hot topic is a player that we could see traded before the freeze is Darcy Kuemper in Arizona. He's getting a lot of attention. Teams like Toronto are in the mix. We got a team like the Avalanche are in the mix. Teams that kind of have a lot of uncertainty right now on who their two goaltenders are going to be next year. And if they can convince Arizona to retain some salary under contract, then it would make matters even better when it comes to their salary cap situation. So Darcy Kuemper is getting a lot of attention. You can even throw the Edmonton Oilers in there. They have uncertainty as well. They're talking to Mike Smith, but that's not hammered out yet. So they have that. And then they do need another goalie as well, because they're expected to either buy out or find a trade if they can, which is unlikely for Koskinen. So a buyout's more likely in that scenario. But still, they're a team that's going to be looking for another goaltender here too. So, a guy like Kuemper, who's going to only have 1 year left on his contract, is certainly preferable. The Coyotes are also motivated to make this deal ahead of expansion too, because they would rather protect Aiden Hill in the expansion draft. He can be the goalie of the future, a lot cheaper costs here, much younger, and they're likely would lose Kuemper. At least the odds would be decent that Seattle would take him, so they likely want to move him ahead of time anyway. So we'll see here. He's one player that would be not surprising at all to see traded between now and tomorrow sometime before the freeze kicks in. Now, when it comes to Zach Hyman, again, the latest updates indicate that it's pretty much a given that he's going to be likely gone from the Maple Leafs. The leading contenders, though, to sign him, since he does have permission to already speak with other teams, are three of the teams in Western Canada, being Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton. Now, as I mentioned before, he's been linked to Edmonton for probably the longest period of time. I'm not quite sure how the Canucks would make this work, though. I think it would be very, very challenging, given the fact that they've only got about $15 million in cap space. They need to sign Pettersson. They need to sign Hughes. They do have that Louis Eriksson contract, which they need to figure out what they're going to do there. They could do a buyout. They'll get some relief, but not a ton, like not the $6 billion that's on their cap. They're only going to save a couple million there. They are rumored to be trading Nate Schmidt, but if you trade Nate Schmidt and you replace him with a top six forward, like a Hyman, then who's going to play defense? So it's difficult to say how that works out, because I've seen people on Twitter saying, well, we'll go out and we'll get a guy like Seth Jones or Dougie Hamilton. Right, that's easier said than done. And where are you going to find the money for that? You're not going to have it. So if you want to replace Schmidt with a top six forward, your defense is going to be cheaper and less experienced and probably weaker. And I'm not really sure that that's a terrific idea either. So we'll have to see on that front. But Zach Hyman is rumored to be getting deals of anywhere from 6x6, so $6 million for 6 years. Some even think that maybe a seventh year is possible. And if his agent really wants to push for 8 years, then we might, and I stress might, probably low odds, but you just never know, of an 8th year, then the Leafs could do the deal and trade him and maybe get a draft pick or something in return. But right now, that's what things are looking like for Hyman. Other teams that are kind of rumored to be in the mix were like Detroit, Boston to a degree as well. But I think the Boston stuff is largely dependent on what happens with Hall and Krejci. Right now, the latest on that is that Hall is likely going to market, but still keeping communication with Boston. Good chance he goes back there, but really, unless somebody comes along in free agency and kind of blows the socks off here with a much better financial offer, then maybe he leaves. But I think there's a decent chance that he does wind up back here with the Bruins as well. But Vancouver is certainly going to be another interesting team to watch. We do have some other tidbits here on the Canucks to talk about as well, besides Hyman, because we've seen word today that Alex Edler is officially going to be hitting free agency. His agent confirmed that it's not a case of the Vancouver offer being very insulting or anything like that. It's just a case of Edler finally sounds like he's ready to move on, because he, to a degree, has been through a lot of tough times in Vancouver. They've missed the playoffs a lot of the years that he's been playing, at least as of late especially. So it sounds like he's ready to go because he's more interested in trying to win a Stanley Cup before his career's over. That's the impression I got. I'm not going to put words in anybody's mouth, but based on what was being said, that's just how I took it to be. It's kind of odd now that you see his former teammates and countrymen and Daniel and Henrik Sedin return to the organization, and now he would leave. It's just kind of odd timing, but you know what? I understand his sentiment. If he doesn't feel like he could win there, then maybe he wants to move on. Same thing goes for Travis Hamonic. Apparently there's rumor that they did table an offer, but they haven't heard back. They don't know what he's going to do. So there is some uncertainty on their blue line. And Nate Schmidt is a player that they are trying to trade. I know Jim Benning in his latest interview that he did totally downplayed it and made it sound like there was no Nate Schmidt situation. They weren't trying to trade him. He's like, teams can call. It's like, I think it's more than that based on what we're hearing. They are trying to move that contract because the Nate Schmidt experiment just didn't work out to be a good fit. I'm not sure that it's a big deal and that he's really pressuring them to move him, but I think both sides would agree that it wasn't a good fit and that if they can find a deal, they'll certainly do so at the very least. And then I've noticed that there's more rumors around Brock Besser yet again. Like it's the annual Brock Besser rumor-a-thon that's kind of kicking back up here, and I'm not really sure where that's coming from. I know there were some outlets saying that the Canucks are open to trading Brock Besser, and you know what? I think any team would be open to trading anybody if it's the right deal and you're going to get like an elite player back. Like the only way they're going to really entertain trading Brock Besser is if they're getting a top-end elite level player coming back that they absolutely can't refuse, and the odds of that happening are extremely slim. Brock Besser's been there for a while now. He's getting better all the time. He's a part of the team's future. Is he the top player on the team? No. I mean, he's not the top player on the team, but you know what? He's still an important piece. Like I said, I'm not going to say that they would absolutely never trade him, but if they ever do, it's going to have to be for something really good. Like I said, that you just can't pass up. I don't think there's no way the Canucks are shopping Besser. That just doesn't make any sense. So if teams are calling, that's one thing, but there's no way the Canucks are shopping him unless somebody calls and offers, like an elite level player that you just can't pass up, like a Connor McDavid or something ridiculous, which isn't going to happen. Then it ain't going to happen. It's just that simple. But I did see Besser's name out there in the rumor mill, and I really don't think there's absolutely anything to that at all. So that is all your latest news for now. We'll likely be back as soon as we have more information, so stay tuned for future videos here leading into expansion, and we'll discuss further what's likely going to go down. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.